Hello young learners, hope you all are having a wonderful day. We already learned price elasticity of demand, its calculation and different shapes and degrees of PED. So today we'll be learning determinants of PED. Okay, so what is that actually, determinants of PED? So before I start, I just would like to remind you that when we learn demand is elastic, so we learned that when PED is greater than 1, that is elastic demand. When demand is inelastic, PED is less than 1. Alright? So that was elastic and inelastic part. But in reality, how will we determine PED? So, if any consumers or even the seller or the buyer or whatever it is, or any government, anyone. So usually consumers, PED is linked to the consumers directly because consumers are the decision maker. So when consumers go to the market, they have to decide whether the demand for any product is elastic or not. But consumers do they have any idea about whether value of PED is greater than 1 or less than 1? No. They are realistic, they want to behave practically. So in that case, what does elastic demand and inelastic demand mean from the real life? We will try to explain now. So this is the determinants of PED. Alright. So the first point is time period. So if you are a consumer, you go to the market, if you have enough time in your hand, then you can make decision nicely, smoothly. You don't need to be worried. You would like to bargain with the seller if price is very high. So if any seller asks for higher prices, then you would like to bargain if you have enough time to make decision. But things are something like that, you have very little time in your hand. For example, you want to book a wedding hall for your any relatives wedding program maybe. So you have only 2 or 3 days in your hand. What will you do? You have very little time in your hand to make decisions. So definitely these 2-3 days is not good enough to get a better wedding hall. So you are searching one after another. No, you are not getting. Everyone is saying the hall is already booked. Sorry, nothing is vacant over here. So what do? Suddenly you got one. You got one hall and that is still vacant. And what will you do? They are charging very high price because they said only 2-3 days in your hand, so the price will be very high. What will you do? Will you go for bargaining? No, you have little time and you don't have any other hall. So in that case, you book it immediately. That means if you have little time in your hand, you know that I have to buy anyone at any how. So in that case, you cannot be that much reactionary. You will be less responsive. So demand will be inelastic. So that means if there are huge time in your hand, you can make decisions and you can bargain. But if there are less time in your hand, you cannot bargain that much. So demand will be inelastic. So time period is a factor for consumers to make decision. If there are enough time, demand will be elastic, but if there are less time in hand, demand will be inelastic. Then move on to the next point, availability of substitute. This is another point for the consumers to make decision. If there are available substitute, alternative in the market, you want to buy something and there are many alternatives, alternative shops or maybe alternative products, then you will bargain with the shopkeeper and the seller or shopkeeper, yeah. But if this is something that you don't have any substitute, you are bound to buy that product. So in that case, there are no other alternative and you are bound to buy that and you will be less responsive. So demand will be in that case inelastic. So that means if there are available substitute in the markets, consumers will have more bargaining power and demand will be elastic. But if there are no substitutes or very less substitutes, consumers do not have that much bargaining power and they will be less responsive and demand will be inelastic. Then the third point is proportion of income spent. So when we spend our money, we need to be careful about the price and how much this product is selling from my income. If any product is very expensive and it takes a larger proportion of my income, then as a consumer, I will be very much reactionary. For example, your house rent. So if you find that house rent takes around 30-40% of a person's income, all right. So if price of house rent increases, as a consumer you will be very much reactionary because house rent is taking a larger proportion of your income. In that case, demand will be elastic. But if things are something is very cheaper, say salt, every household use salt in their curry, all right, and if price of salt increases say from 100 taka to 200 taka, 100% price increases. What will you do? You will be very much responsive? No, because this 200 taka is nothing for your entire income. So it takes very smallest proportion of your income. It doesn't take larger proportion of your income. In that case, if the price of soil increases 100%, still demand will be inelastic. But if price of house rent increases say 10%, 15%, you will be very much reactive, because housing is very expensive item and it takes larger proportion of your income. So when you spend for any product, you need to be calculative whether the product takes larger proportion of your income or it takes smaller proportion of your income, and based on that, price elasticity of demand is determined. Then necessity or luxury items. If any product is very necessity for you, this is something is very important for you, you are bound to buy that. Say emergency injection. Without this injection, some patient is going to die. What will you do? You cannot wait for that the price will go down and then you will buy the injection. No, the patient is going to die. This is necessity for you. In that case, demand will be inelastic. You will be very much less responsive, or you cannot be that much reactionary. So if products is necessity, in that case, as a consumer, demand will be inelastic because you will be less reactionary. And if it is luxury products, what happens? Luxury products is something, it's expensive, yeah, and this is not something that you need to buy now. If it is expensive, you will wait for future, maybe in the next month or next 2, 3, 4 months, you will buy this. And there are a lot of substitutes in the market. So in that case, you cannot be that much reactionary. So if it is luxury goods, demand will be elastic, because you will bargain and you will wait for future. But if it is necessity item, no way. You must bound that. You have nothing to do with the price. In that case, demand will be inelastic. Then finally, habit forming or addictive products. If it is habit forming, something is habituated. Say people take cigarettes, so smoking. So those who smokes, even if price rises, they don't bother. They still buy the product, because this is something habit forming and addictive items. So customers or consumers do not bother the change in price. Even if it is expensive, still they buy that. In that case, demand is inelastic, because this is habit forming or addictive products. So you see, these 5 points are telling us which type of products will be elastic and which type of products will be inelastic. And based on these, consumers make decision in the market. And in fact, based on these, producers also make decisions, and producers' decision is not elasticity of demand, that is elasticity of supply. And we will learn about this in the chapter elasticity of supply, whether supply will be elastic or inelastic. But so far we learned whether demand will be elastic or inelastic. So we learned initially a calculation and diagrams. Now practically in the marketplace, how consumers react or how consumers behave according to the price elasticity of demand. I hope you all understood the topic. If you have any confusion or clarification, you can text me and you can let me know your opinion. And don't forget to share my channel, subscribe my channel. If you subscribe, you will get the notification immediately. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.